The night always warns you before it wants something. It reaches ahead of itself into your breath, into your nerves, into the places you pretend don't tremble, and it whispers a truth you're not ready to hear. And if you're listening closely, you'll hear the voice of whispering narratives drifting through the dark, reminding you that every story begins with a shiver. I should have known the moment the wind went still, the moment the trees stood as if listening. I should have known the night wasn't coming for me. It was coming for my son. A silence pressed against our house so hard the walls felt like they were holding their breath. The moon hadn't even cleared the ridge yet, but its glow already bled silver across the treetops like something leaking through the world. You don't forget to glow like that. It's the kind that makes dogs cower, windows hum, and fathers break in ways they don't admit. No one survives the night it chooses. People in towns like ours don't whisper legends to scare children. They whisper them to stay alive. And as I stepped onto the porch, trying to understand why the air tasted metallic and wrong, something deep in the pine-dark hills let out a groan, not a howl, not yet. Something older warming up its lungs. A branch snapped behind the shed. A second one, then a low, dragging scrape in the dirt. Something was moving, something was circling, something was deciding. I felt it before I heard it, the sense that the night itself had leaned closer. Open loop number 1 planted what is stalking the property. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, my breath clouded white despite the summer evening. And then, from my son's bedroom window upstairs, a sound I still hear even now, a choking gasp halfway between a sob and a growl, the kind of sound a throat makes when it can't decide what shape it should be, the kind of sound a father never forgets. Before I could move, the moon finally tore itself free from behind the ridge, full, swollen, and red at the edges, like an eye irritated by witnessing too much. It spilled light through the trees in long, trembling lines, and with that moonrise came a single hair-raising truth. Something was wrong with my boy. The air buzzed, my heart stuttered. A second sound came, bones clicking out of rhythm, like someone cracking their knuckles in a panic. Too fast, too many, too wrong. Then my son's voice, thin, warped, breaking in places. Dad, something's happening. He wasn't calling for help. He was warning me, right here, before the story can breathe another second. The channel intro slipped in like a shadow leaning between us and the moonlight. Folks in towns like this don't whisper their legends to scare children. They whisper them to stay alive. The words carried the weight of generations, the kind spoken by those who survived things they don't discuss in daylight. And then we were thrown straight back into the night that took my boy. The house felt smaller when I ran inside, like the walls were inching in, trying to keep something from escaping. Every step up that old staircase groaned like the boards were warning me to stop. The smell hit halfway up, copper, sweat, something wild, not the smell of a sick child. The smell of an animal cornered in its own skin. Fear junkie hook. Lore hunter. Curiosity. Transformation. Addict dread. Every persona fed in one breath. I reached the bedroom door. It pulsed with shadows from his lamp. Something inside hit the floor hard enough to rattle the glass. A low whine followed one no human throat should make, pitched wrong and layered with something deeper, like another voice growing underneath. Microhook. What is happening to him? The doorknob burned cold against my palm. I pushed inside. The room was dim except for the moonbeam slicing across the bed and catching the dust like floating ash. My son was hunched on the floor, back to me, both hands buried in his hair as if trying to hold his skull together. His spine trembled in waves. His breath came in snarls. His silhouette was all wrong, bones lifting where bones don't belong. Dad, Don't come closer. His voice had an echo, not metaphorically, a literal echo. Two tones, two throats. His shoulder blades pushed out sharply, pulsing like something underneath was testing the ribs for weakness. His fingers twitched, spasmed, lengthened, then snapped back. The carpet beneath him tore in thin claw marks he didn't realize he was making. Open loop number 2. Why is the transformation happening now? The silver moonbeam crawled up his neck, and every place it touched made his skin ripple like heated film. I could see the veins change color, darkening at the edges, moving beneath the surface like ink dragged through water. He turned halfway toward me. One eye was still his brown, terrified, begging me for an answer. The other burned, amber slitted, reflective, catching the light the way wolves do, not glowing, reflecting, as if the moon had found a mirror inside him. No one survives the night it chooses. The old saying drifted through my head. A low vibration rolled through the room, not from him, but from the floorboards. A growl that came from somewhere below the house, deep and aware. My son lifted his head slightly. It's here, Dad. It followed me home. Escalation spike. Attention reset. What followed you? I whispered. His answer wasn't words. It was the sound of bones shifting again, harder this time, angrier. Something inside him was done waiting. I backed toward the window and saw movement outside, long shadows slipping between trees faster than anything running on two legs. A second set of shadows moved against them, slower, heavier, like something stalking the stalker. Open loop number 3. What else is out there with him? Then came the howl. It started far away, then climbed, then broke, then rebuilt itself in a deeper register that didn't belong anywhere natural. My son shuddered so violently I heard his teeth snap together. His arms jerked forward, his elbows bent backwards for a moment, then corrected, his back arched. Sweat rolled down his skin and steamed where it hit the cold air. Something about the howl hurt him, like the sound was calling out a truth his body couldn't deny. Dad, it wants me. It wants me back. A father's heart breaks quietly. A werewolf's doesn't break at all. It changes shape, and something in that room was already deciding which one mine would become. He stood up, slowly, limbs trembling, knees cracking, neck rolling like his head was too heavy. He towered higher than he should have. Not fully transformed, no. That horror was still coming, but stretched into a shape halfway between boy and beast. His breath fogged the air, his jaw clicked. The corners of his mouth tore slightly when he tried to speak. Run, he whispered. Then the boards downstairs shrieked as something massive entered the house. The werewolf outside wasn't coming. It was already inside, and it wasn't alone. The first thing I heard was the frame of the front door giving up. It wasn't a polite knock, not even a kick. It was the sound of old wood remembering a promise it had made itself long ago, that if something on 4 legs tore a doorway ever wanted in, this house wouldn't pretend it could keep it out. The crash shook dust from the ceiling. A picture frame fell from my son's wall and shattered beside him. He flinched, but he didn't move away from the moonbeam. If anything, he leaned into it, like the cold light was both burning and pulling him. The growl that followed wasn't just heard. It pressed up through the soles of my feet. It slid up the walls. It crawled into my jaw until my teeth buzzed. It made every stupid, human thing in our house, photos, curtains, light switches, feel like paper in the wind. It was inside, the thing that had haunted the tree line, the thing the dogs wouldn't bark at, the thing the old folks in town never named directly. It had stepped into our home like it was finally claiming something it had been promised. I moved without feeling my legs. I put myself between my son and the door out of instinct more than bravery. He was taller than me now, shoulders stretching, shirt seams tearing, breaths coming in snarls. But somewhere under all that wrongness, he was still my kid. It followed me, he whispered again, words rattling around new shapes in his mouth. Idad, I called it. Another mystery. Another loop tightening. How does a boy call a monster like that? What do you mean? I hissed. How? He turned fully then, and the part of me that had ever believed in God went very quiet. His face was a battlefield between two species. One side still soft, human, streaked with tears. The other side pulled tight, cheekbones sharpened, canines lengthening in slow, horrible increments. A strip of coarse dark hair climbed up his jawline, like something growing in fast forward. His ear on that side had lifted slightly, the tip long, angled toward the door like it could hear more than I ever would again. I thought it was in my head, he said, but when I dreamed of the woods, it heard me. The hallway lights stuttered outside his room. The house exhaled a long, low creak. There were footsteps below us, now heavy, deliberate, nails tapping wood between steps. It wasn't searching. It was coming straight for where the scent was strongest. I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear of what was climbing the stairs, from the recognition of its rhythm. There's a way wolves move that nothing else does, shoulders rolling, hips low, each step chosen not just to move forward, but to own the ground. I hadn't heard that pattern since I was a teenager standing in a field, leading into the snow from a bite I never told anyone about. The sound coming up my stairs matched it perfectly. The old rule the locals never broke hummed in the back of my skull. Never stay on your ancestral land during a reed-edged full moon. Never. Not if your families had troubles. We'd stayed. I'd pretended there were no troubles. I'd told myself the way the wolves watched me from the tree line as a boy meant nothing. The stairwell groaned under a weight it had never carried. A low panting rose with it, slow and wet and hungry. Ask the locals about that night, I thought. They'll look away before answering. Get in the corner, I told my son, pointing away from the door, toward the far wall where the moonlight didn't quite reach, back where it's dark now. He tried to obey. He really did. But as soon as he stepped out of the moonbeam, his legs buckled. His knees twisted as if they were confused which way to bend. He caught himself on his hands, his fingers splayed, nails scraping grooves in the floorboards. When he tried to lift his head, his spine arched in a sharp, painful wave that dragged a strangled yelp from him. He wasn't turning because something outside bit him. He was turning because something inside finally had enough moon to wake. Dad. His voice dropped into a sound that made every hair on my arms rise. 2 tones again, one of them lower, older. It's mad at you. A pause on the stairs, a snaffle, air pulled in like tasting words at me. That was when I finally remembered being 16 in those woods. Blood running down my calf, my own father's white face as he dragged me into the house, the way he'd locked every door and sat with a shotgun all night, sweat pouring off him though the air had been freezing. He'd never asked me how it felt. He'd never spoken of the bite. He'd just said, we made it past the age. Maybe it skipped you, maybe it's over. But curses don't skip. They wait, they dilute, hide, thin out across years, then choose another place to bloom. The creature reached the top step. The hallway went silent, as if the air itself had flattened to make room for it. Its shadow hit the wall before its body appeared, too long, shoulders high enough to brush the ceiling, head cocked at that strange, canine angle that says, I know you're there, whether you breathe or not. Its outline paused outside my son's door for one heartbeat. We were frozen that way. The half-changed boy behind me, my palms sweating against nothing. The monster in the hall listening. Then it inhaled, The sound was so deep it felt like it was pulling more than air out of the room. It dragged at my lungs, my thoughts, at whatever makes a person feel like themselves. When it exhaled, I heard the decision, and it had stepped into the doorway. Yellow eyes, not amber like my son's new ones, but a feral shattered glass yellow that caught the lamplight and shredded it. Its fur was dark, slick in places with something that wasn't just rain. Its snout was long, lips peeling back to show teeth that didn't look like they belonged in anything that ever walked upright. And it was upright, half-hunched, claws hanging, every inch of it filled with the lazy, terrifying confidence of something that has chased humans before and never needed to run. It looked at me, then at him, then back at me. Recognition flashed in that inhuman face like lightning. Not just prey recognition, blood recognition. The scars on my calf throbbed like fresh wounds. "I know you," I whispered, the words scraping sandpaper across my throat. "You're the one from the field." Its lips twitched at the edges. If wolves could sneer, this one did. My son whimpered. When the creature heard his voice, its head snapped fully toward him, breath flaring. It took one heavy step into the room. The floor complained. My hand went to the pocket where I'd shoved that ridiculous old charm my father had given me, a disc of iron stamped with a crescent and a snarling wolf head. "For nights when the moon looks wrong," he'd said. I'd laughed it off. Kept it anyway. Tradition, not belief. The metal burned my fingers now. It was hot, as if remembering a function it once had. Or hunter bait, the symbolic object, the forbidden knowledge my family had passed down without context. I stepped sideways, putting myself between my son and the beast. The werewolf's shoulders rolled, its claws flexed, scraping long trenches into the floor. "You're not taking him," I said, shocking myself with the steadiness of my voice. Its head lowered a fraction. Its nostrils flared again, taking in the scent of my fear, my sweat, my aging human body. Then its gaze dropped to my leg, right where the old bite scars hid under fabric. It knew, it remembered, or maybe it smelled the echo of its own teeth in my flesh, faint but real. Its lips peeled back further, exposing more of its gums, more jagged teeth. Not quite a smile. It was here for a debt, one my father had tried to ignore, one I hadn't even realized I owed. And my son was the interest. Behind me, bone popped. Then again, louder. My son's hand slammed onto the floor beside my bare heels. I glanced down and saw his fingers elongating, the bones pushing through his skin just enough that his nails thickened, blackened, and began to hook. His shoulders bulged, shirt tearing like wet paper. "Dad," he gasped. "It hurts. Make it stop. Please, make it stop." There are moments that tear you clean in half. Part of you wants to shield your child from every pain. The other part knows some pains don't stop without taking something else with them. The werewolf stepped closer. Its breath hit my face, hot and rank, carrying the smell of earth, blood, and something strangely familiar, my own fear, at 16 maybe, now. Xternalized. It lowered its head, not to strike, to nudge my shoulder, to push me aside, as if I were an obstacle, not an opponent. Something in me snapped. I slammed the iron charm against its chest. The sound it made was not from this world, not animal, not human. A layered howl, like a choir of wolves all choking at once. It staggered back a step, claws flailing, smoke curling faintly where the charm branded its fur. The smell of burnt hair and something older filled the room. My son screamed, clutching his chest like he'd been struck. Two creatures, one pain. The charm wasn't a weapon, it was a key, and I had just twisted it. The werewolf tumbled into the hallway wall, snarling, claws tearing deep gouges in the plaster as it fought something unseen. Its muscles rippled in waves that didn't match its movements. For the first time, I saw hesitation in its eyes. Anger, yes. Hunger, absolutely. But behind all that, a flash of something else. Recognition not of prey. Recognition of a rival, of the one it had marked years ago, now standing between it and the evolution of its own bloodline. My son's body arched. His spine elongated so quickly, I heard vertebrae grind. His legs bent backward into a didicrade stance, heels lifting from the floor, tendons snapping and re-knitting with wet pops. Fur erupted along his arms, racing over his shoulders like a shadow catching fire. His jaw pushed forward, teeth spilling over his lips, eyes now fully golden, pupils narrowed to predatory slits. My chest heaved, blood dripped from my muzzle, my shoulder, my side. Pain threaded through every muscle, not just from the fight, but from the weight of something settling into place. The curse, the role, the terrible throne. The pack stared, waiting, and behind me, my son whispered, "Dad." I turned. He flinched, stepping back, hitting the doorframe. The blankets slipped, revealing pale skin mottled with fading bruises and half-healed scratches. There was still a slight unnatural bend to his fingers, a hint to much forearm when his arm hung at rest. The curse hadn't left him completely, but it wasn't fully his anymore. In his eyes, I saw awe, horror, love, a wild mix that made my new heart ache. I took one slow step toward him. He swallowed. Are you going to hurt me?" The question pierced deeper than teeth. I lowered my head. It took everything in me to fight the instincts, snapping at the edges of my mind. The part that smelled blood and wanted more. The part that saw weakness and wanted to cull it. I forced that down, chained it, shoved it into some corner of myself, where it could gnaw on the dark while something better held the leash. I pressed my muzzle gently against his hand. His fingers slid into my fur, trembling, then gripping, the way he'd grabbed my sleeve crossing streets when he was little. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't know. I thought it was just in my head." I kept seeing something watching from the woods, and when I dreamed it, it got closer. And then I woke up with mud on my feet. "And he choked. Tears streaked his face. I couldn't answer with words, not anymore. But I remembered them. "If this reminds you of something you've heard, you're not alone," I thought. Old stories of other families, other moons, other choices swirling. Behind us, the pack in the trees waited, breaths white in the cold air. They weren't dangerous in the way people think. Not right now. They were patient, curious, testing the shape of this new hierarchy. One of them stepped forward, a lean, grey-furred wolf with scars across its muzzle. It huffed softly, almost respectfully, then turned its head, looking into the deep woods, and trotted away. The others followed, one by one, until the tree line emptied and the forest swallowed them back into its black ribs. Their howls echoed faintly as they went, not angry, not mournful, accepting the curse doesn't die with one body. It transfers, it rewrites, it adjusts its ledger. Tonight, I'd taken the Alpha's place, but that didn't mean we were free. My son stared up at the moon, lips moving soundlessly. Maybe he was praying. Maybe he was counting cycles. Maybe he was asking the same question I was. What happens next month? The answer sat heavy in my bones. We live, we hide, we manage it. We try to keep it from spilling onto anyone else's children. The wind picked up, finally moving again after holding its breath all night. It carried the smell of pine, wet dirt, distant smoke from someone's fireplace. Regular, human smells layered over the sharper, wilder ones. Our neighbors would ask about the noises, about the broken door, about the strange, deep howls that had rolled over the hills. We'd lie. They'd pretend to believe us. They'd lock their doors on red-edged moons, and somewhere in town, the old ones would nod to each other, not surprised. Because legends like this don't disappear. They just change names. My son's legs buckled. He sank onto the porch steps, shoulders shaking. I nudged him gently until he leaned against me, his head resting against my fur. His heartbeat thudded against my ribs. Mine, heavier now, thudded back. "Will you remember me?" he whispered. "When you're like this." I closed my eyes. I remembered his first steps, first fever, first time he shouted at me in teenage anger and then apologized with quiet, awkward sincerity. I remembered the way he'd looked asleep in the car seat, the way he'd gripped my finger with his whole hand as a newborn. I remembered enough to anchor myself. I nodded, the motion slow, deliberate. He sobbed in relief. Above us, the moon slid, a fraction lower in the sky. Clouds drifted in from the west, dimming its eye. The worst of the night eased, the sharp edge of it softening into something almost gentle. The pain in my bones dulled from a roar to a drone. I stayed like that until the first hint of dawn lightened the horizon, pale grey licking at the edges of the world. The curse loosened its grip as the sky paled, muscles shrinking, claws retracting, bones reconfiguring. When I finally collapsed on the porch, naked, bloody, shivering, my son pulled the blanket over me, hands steady despite everything. "Dad," he said softly, "we're not telling anyone, are we?" I coughed, tasted copper, forced my eyes open. The world was bright and blurry. He knelt over me, human, exhausted, older than he'd been yesterday in ways that had nothing to do with growth. "No," I rasped, "we're not." He nodded, a small, broken motion. We'll figure it out," he said. "We'll watch the moon. We'll leave town if we have to. Or go where no one's close when it's like this." He wasn't asking if I would handle it. He was promising he'd stay, even knowing what I'd become. People talk about monsters like they're only out there, in the woods, in the dark. They don't talk about the ones sitting on porches bleeding, trying to figure out how to love their kids right when their own shadow wants to howl. The sky lightened. Birds started their thin, oblivious songs. Somewhere down the road, a truck started up. Someone heading to work, unaware of the dead thing cooling in our yard just out of sight. The claw marks on our floors. The way my son flinched every time a dog barked now. We dragged the alpha's body into the woods before full daylight. It took everything I had left. Every muscle screamed. My son helped, grip sliding on fur slick with half-dried blood. Jaw clenched. We buried it in a hollow where the earth felt receptive, an old place, the kind you avoid when hiking without knowing why. No marker, no stone dots. The forest knew when. We walked back up to the house. We both avoided looking at the moon, pale and shrinking in the morning sky. That night, I lay awake long after my son's breathing went slow, and even in the next room. I listened to the wind, to the crick of the house, to my own heartbeat. Somewhere, far off, a wolf howled, not close enough to be a threat, not far enough to be forgotten. My bones ached in quiet response. Stories like this don't end when the monster falls. They end when you realize you've stepped into its place, and the next chapter will be written every time the moon pulls a little harder at your blood. If you ever find yourself in a town where the locals avoid looking at the sky on certain nights, don't ask why. If this reminds you of something you've heard, you're not alone. Because there are fathers out here listening to the wind, counting days between full moons, and praying their sons never again make the sounds mine did on their floor that night. And somewhere in the dark between the trees, something listens back, making sure the deal holds. No one survives the night it chooses. They just learn to live with what it leaves behind. If you're still here, the night hasn't let you go yet. You've walked through the house with us, heard the bones shift, felt the red edge of the moon press against the windows. Stories like this leave marks, quiet ones, the kind that make you glance at your children a little differently when the dogs start barking at nothing. If you've heard a howl like the one that found this family, if you've seen eyes in the tree line that weren't quite animal, weren't quite human, leave a word below. Someone else may need the warning before the next moon reases over their roof. If the night pressed a truth into your ribs, don't walk away from it. Stories like this don't end. They wait. And if you made it this far, the dark already knows your name. Before you slip back into the quiet, leave your mark below. Tell me what part followed you out of the shadows, and if you dare to return, follow the trail back to whispering narratives. Subscribe, step into the next nightmare, and remember, the moon never stops watching. And if you want to remember this feeling the next time the sky goes silver, stay close, listen, and subscribe before the next full moon. He wasn't fully a wolf, not yet. But he wasn't my boy anymore either. He was caught between, tearing at both directions. The moonlight pulsed through the window like a heartbeat, each throb dragging more of his humanity away. Identity doesn't vanish. It gets diluted, rewritten, buried under instinct. Please, he rasped, voice shredding, barely intelligible now. Don't let it take me. Behind him, through the window, I could see the tree line. More shapes stood there now, just beyond the first row of pines. Tall, still, patient, watching a whole line of silhouettes. Ears pricked, tails low, eyes catching glints of moon. It wasn't just one werewolf. It had brought the rest of the bloodline to witness. You don't get many chances to rewrite a curse. You don't get any clean ones. Something inside my chest squeezed hard, sharp, like a fist around my heart. Heat flooded my veins, followed by a cold that felt like snowmelt. My vision swam for a second. The room wavered. The smell intensified. Iron fur, wet earth. My old bite scars burned. The charm in my hand grew hotter. The werewolf in the hall shook itself and roared. A sound that cracked the light bulb overhead and sent glass raining down. Its gaze locked on me, not my son anymore. Me, because it could feel it too. The bloodline shifting, the inheritance trying to leap. Dad, my son whimpered, voice now wrapped around growls. What's happening? I looked at him, at the monster he was midway into becoming, at the boy hidden under all that pain. Then I looked at the alpha creature in the hall, at the pack beyond the glass, at the moon overhead, swollen and waiting. The curse needed a vessel. It had picked my son, but curses are greedy, not smart. Sometimes they'll take more if offered. Old thought came back, something I'd heard in a hunter's bar years ago, when I'd been stupid enough to ask about the animal that bit me. You make a choice early, boy. You either carry it or it finds a way down the line. I'd never made that choice. I'd just pretended there was no decision to make. The night was forcing it now. My fingers clenched around the charm until it threatened to fuse with my skin. I stepped closer to my son, close enough to feel his breath, hot and wild, blast against my face. His lips curled back involuntarily, exposing teeth made for tearing. The muscles in his neck twitched, wanting to lunge, wanting to feed. He was fighting not to. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. Then I pulled him into my arms. His claws tore into my back immediately on instinct, slicing through skin, hot lines of pain crossing old scars. He snarled in my ear, a deep, animal sound that vibrated my bones. His jaws snapped inches from my throat. Every survival impulse I had screamed at me to let go, to push him away, to run dot instead. I held on tighter. The charm, still burning, I pressed, flat between our chests. It was like completing a circuit. Pain detonated, inside me right, blinding, total. My spine bowed backward. My ribs felt like they were being pried open from the inside. My jaw locked. My vision went red around the edges, then white, then exploded into a rain of images. Wolves loping across snowfields through generations. Men and women kneeling under trees, foreheads pressed to dirt. A wolf biting a boy in a field, then turning away instead of finishing the job. A father turning his back on the blood, on the snow, curse circling, patient dot, and the moon above all of it, full and full and full. The werewolf in the hall reeled as if struck. It staggered against the doorframe, claws scraping grooves as it tried to steady itself. A guttural snarl tore out of it, but there was pain in it now, confusion. Its pack outside the window shifted, restless, some of them pacing, some lifting muzzles to the sky as if scenting a change in the wind. Energy, not magic, not something clean like that, but a pressure. A lineage flooded through my son's body into mine and back again, rebounding, searching. The charm anchored it, dragging it like iron filings to a magnet. The scars on my legs split open, blood soaking my jeans, heart an immediate. Not old wounds, new. The teeth marks bloomed fresh as if time were rewinding. My son's body shuddered, his limbs twitched, his spine jerked. For a moment, his eyes cleared gold, fading back to brown, anger dropping to confusion. "Dad," he whispered in his natural voice. "What are you then?" The flood hit me fully, and I screamed. It felt like something huge and starving tried to pour itself into a vessel too small. Bones creaked, joints popped, my fingers clenched and lengthened, nails darkening and curving against my will. My teeth pushed down against my lips, splitting them, filling my mouth with blood. My ears rang with a roar I realized was my own voice, layered with something deeper, older, impossible. My son collapsed to the floor, panting, his body shrinking, back towards something mostly human, fur receding like a tide. He curled around himself, gasping, clutching his chest. The pain left him as it crawled into me. The werewolf in the hall straightened slowly, its head tilted, eyes narrowing, nostrils flaring. It took in the new scent filling the room, the fully awakened version of something it had only dimly envisioned for years. It recognized me not as prey now, not even as debtor, as successor. No one survives the night it chooses, drifted through my head again. The night hadn't chosen my son, not anymore, it had chosen me. I don't remember falling, but I remember the way the floor felt against my palms when they hit the boards suddenly too close, my view too low, my shoulders too wide. I heard fabric tearing, more of it, all of it, as muscles swelled, as bones rearranged, as my ribcage expanded, my spine snapped into a new curve. Pain arcing through me like lightning over and over until it stopped feeling like pain and more like inevitability. The smell of the room sharpened, rich and layered. I could pick out every individual dust, mote, every streak of copper in the air, the exact place my son's fierce sweat hit the fibers of the carpet. My hearing exploded outward. Heartbeats whined against the glass, the tiny click of a spider moving in the corner. The world narrowed to scent and sound and hunger. When I raised my head, my vision had changed. Colors muted, edges sharpened, motion drew my attention like a magnet. My son lay in front of me, small again, so small. His eyes huge, wet, fixed on my new shape. There were fresh claw marks on his arms and chest mine. The sight stung, even through the fog of instinct. "Dad," he whispered, "are you still you?" The werewolf in the hall took a slow, assessing step into the room. We were almost eye to eye now. It growled low, rumbling thunder that vibrated in my chest cavity. A challenge, a question. I answered without words. I stepped over my son. I put myself between him and the creature again, but this time on 4 legs. A low snarl ticked out of my throat, unplanned, but honest. Not at my boy, at the thing that had come to claim him. The alpha's ears twitched. Its eyes narrowed. Then it lunged. The impact knocked us both into the hallway, claws scrabbling for purchase on blood-slick wood. We hit the opposite wall so hard, the plaster cracked. Its teeth snapped for my throat. Mine snapped for its muscles locked, limbs tangled. This wasn't a clean, pretty fight like nature documentaries promise. It was messy, frantic, full of shortened breaths and wild panicked strikes. Every time its teeth found fur, I felt fire. Every time mine found its hide, I tasted history. We crashed down the stairs in a tangle of limbs and growls. Some part of me, deep down, was screaming at the graphic sound of my own bones taking hits that should kill a human. The rest of me didn't care. The rest of me only cared that the thing I fought had tried to take my child. Furniture shattered around us. The front door, already hanging, crooked, blew fully off its hinges when we hit it, the night rushing in like a cheering crowd. The yard erupted in snarls as the pack beyond the trees took a few steps forward, then stopped, held back by some old rule about who could interfere in a bloodline fight. We rolled into the dirt, into the silver light. The moon watched. The alpha pushed on top of me, jaws clamping around my shoulder, teeth scraping bone. Pain burst white, then red. I twisted, forcing my own head up under its ribs, clamping down, crushing fur and flesh and muscle until I tasted hot blood. It howled and jerked away. I followed, snapping, claws raking. Dark shapes paced at the tree line, restless, hungry, bound by rules I didn't know yet but felt in my new bones. We circled, panting. My shoulder burned. One of my front legs shook. The alpha limped, blood dripping from its side. Saliva hung in strings from its jaw. It glared at me with eyes that held too much intelligence to be anything but cursed. Behind it, on the porch, my son stood on shaky human legs. Wrapped in a blanket, one hand pressed to his chest, eyes wide and wet. He watched the monsters fight, knowing one of them had tucked him into bed only nights ago. Locals say the moon never glows the same after that night. I thought, some tattered scrap of human humor clinging to me. If they saw this, they'd never look at it at all. The alpha lunged again. This time, I didn't meet it head-on. I dropped low, rolled under, and came up along its ribcage. My teeth found its throat, just beneath the jaw. For one suspended second, we froze, that wait time bending. Breath held, the entire forest hushed. I bit down. The sound was awful, wet, final. The alpha's claws dug deep furrows into the dirt as it jerked, fought, then sagged. The light in its eyes flickered, then faded, leaving them glassy and empty. Staring at a sky it had howled at for too many nights. When I let go, it dropped in a heap, an old, heavy thing finally surrendering to gravity. The pack at the tree line threw their heads back and howled as one. It wasn't grief, it was acknowledgement.